This lesson's on the adaptations of leaves for gas exchange, and here are your objectives. Now remember that the function of leaves is primarily photosynthesis, taking in inorganic carbon from carbon dioxide, fixing it, and turning it into sugars. And to do that, they need to take in carbon dioxide, and they need to release oxygen. Carbon dioxide is a raw material, and oxygen is a waste for photosynthesis. And as a result, they need to perform gas exchange, and that requires a large surface area. Recall that we've said that to be efficient, the surface area for gas exchange needs to be large, thin, permeable, and moist. So leaves are going to need to have a large surface area for gas exchange. They also need to expose chloroplasts to sunlight, because sunlight is needed to provide the energy for photosynthesis. And balancing with the need to take in carbon dioxide and release oxygen, and to expose chloroplasts to sunlight, they're also trying to minimize water loss. So there is a bit of a tension here between these two purposes. Let's take a look at a cross-section of a leaf to see how some of the structures are adapted to these functions. So here's a cross-section of a dicotyledonous leaf. A dicotyledon, or a dicot, is a plant that has 2 seed leaves as an embryo, and it includes many or maybe even most of the plants that you would think of. For example, trees that are not conifers, most of them are dicots. So here's a cross-section of a leaf, and we've got sunlight coming in like this, and the first thing that the sunlight would encounter at the top here is the cuticle, which is a waxy layer which allows light to get through, but doesn't allow water to escape from the plant. So it is functioning to allow light in, but to minimize water loss. Next, the light would pass through the upper epidermis, and that is a transparent layer that again is going to let light through. It's a single layer of cells, and then we reach this layer here of columnar cells called the palisade mesophyll. Mesophyll just means it's the cells in the middle of the leaf, and a palisade is a stack of trunks that's used as a fence, so that's kind of what this looks like. This is called the palisade mesophyll, and this has lots of chloroplasts for photosynthesis. So there's lots of photosynthesis happening here in the palisade mesophyll. Then we see this next layer down here, and that's called the spongy mesophyll. And the spongy mesophyll also has chloroplasts for photosynthesis, but it also has air spaces, and those air spaces allow carbon dioxide in and distribute carbon dioxide around the leaf, and then they collect oxygen and send oxygen out via these pores at the bottom that we'll talk about in a moment. So the spongy mesophyll has chloroplasts, also has air spaces. This here is a vascular bundle. It's a vein in the leaf, and it contains 2 parts. This top part here is the xylem, and that contains water and dissolved minerals, and it's carrying those up from the roots up into the leaves and the rest of the plant. And this bottom part here, shown in 2 places, over here and then also over here, that's the phloem. The phloem is carrying dissolved sugars, the products of photosynthesis, that are being made in the leaf and sent to other parts of the plant. So we see xylem here and phloem here, or alternatively xylem here and phloem here as well in cross-section. At the bottom here we have another layer of epidermis that's called the lower epidermis, and then we have the cuticle here as well. So we've got the lower epidermis and the cuticle. Here we see an opening, a pore, called a stoma. Stoma means mouth, and so this is a little mouth, an opening, and singular is stoma, plural is stomata. And that forms an opening for carbon dioxide to diffuse in, and for oxygen, the waste product of photosynthesis, to diffuse out. So we've got gases moving through this stoma, and surrounding the stoma is a pair of cells called guard cells, and those guard cells can open and close in order to allow gases to diffuse in and out, but also to try and minimize water loss. Again, we see this balance of trying to get in what the plant needs for photosynthesis, in this case carbon dioxide, while also minimizing water loss. So carbon dioxide gets in here, it travels in between the guard cells through the stomata, and then all of this inside the spongy mesophyll and even up here in the palisade mesophyll is now surface area across which gas exchange can happen. So carbon dioxide can move into the cells and oxygen can move out of the cells. And so this kind of arrangement with these air spaces here on the interior of the leaf provides much more surface area than just the surface of the leaf itself for gas exchange to occur across all these cell membranes. Over here on the right, we have what we might call a plan diagram. This is the sort of thing that you might draw if you were looking through a light microscope and just drawing the boundaries between the different tissue layers and not actually drawing the individual cells. And so you can see here that you've got the upper epidermis. This is the palisade mesophyll here. Then we've got the spongy mesophyll down here. We've got the xylem and the phloem. And down here we have the lower epidermis and 2 guard cells surrounding a single stoma. Now let's look a little bit more at this idea of water loss. Transpiration refers to the evaporation of water vapor from leaves. And so water is moving up from the roots in the xylem and then moves out into the leaf cells and also out into the air spaces. So this is water moving out, and then it will be lost by evaporation out the open stomata. The guard cells can actually close in order to protect against water loss, and that will happen in times when carbon dioxide is not needed or in times of high water stress. So those guard cells are guarding against water loss by closing when needed. Now, although too much water loss is stressful in the plant actually harnesses that transpiration in order to pull water up the plant, because the cohesive forces resulting from the hydrogen bonds between the water molecules pulls water up the xylem. And so as water leaves here, it's pulling up an unbroken chain of water behind it, and that's how water and minerals move up the plant. Now, there are several factors affecting this and affecting transpiration. First is temperature, because warmer temperatures provide more energy for evaporation, and they're going to increase this water loss by transpiration. Similarly, the humidity of the surrounding air is going to affect this as well. Evaporation actually stops when the air is saturated or full of water. And so in a very humid environment, it will be harder or maybe even impossible to pack more water into the surrounding air, and so transpiration will slow or stop. Similarly, even if all of the air in the environment is not humid, as transpiration proceeds, the air immediately around the leaf can become very saturated with air, and so that can also slow or stop transpiration. And so wind, which blows that water-laden saturated air away and replaces it with drier air, will increase transpiration as well. It replaces that saturated air with drier air that can accept more water, and so transpiration continues. Now, at high rates of wind, sometimes the stomata can actually close, the guard cells can close the stomata, and so this can reverse. Wind can actually slow transpiration, so it can depend on just how windy it is. So that's a look at the adaptations for gas exchange of leaves and factors affecting transpiration.